So the final paper for today's session is going to be presented by Yaron Levi from the Marshall School of Business at the University of Southern California. And the title is Mind the App, Mobile Access to Financial Information and Consumer Behavior. The screen is yours.
Okay, thank you. And I would like to thank the organizers for including the paper in the program. We look forward for your comments. This is a joint work with Shlomo Benartzi from UCLA. Let me start with a bit of background. We can notice that over the past 2 decades, there was a huge change in the way we consume or access our personal financial information, things like our account balances or recent transactions. In the 1990s, you had to wait at home for an actual mail to give you a statement of what you did maybe a week ago or a month ago, or you could call the bank and ask them, but they will still give you a delayed status of your bank account, 3 days old, and it will be very time consuming. In the early 2000s, you could use your personal computer at home with a relatively low speed connection and get up-to-date information, but only at the comfort of your home, not anywhere. It's only since the early 2010s that you could use your mobile device anytime and almost anywhere to see your financials, your personal financials. And in addition to that, we all know that adoption of mobile devices, but also of personal financial apps is a global phenomenon. For example, in the US, 87% of the population carry a mobile phone, and 53% of people with a smartphone and a bank account are using mobile banking. So given this change in technology and the magnitude of adoption of mobile and mobile devices and financial apps, we ask a very simple question. Is it possible that the mobile access to personal financial information actually influences financial behavior? And what we will do in this paper is we will study individuals that already had access to the personal financial information from a personal computer and then decided to install the mobile app. Okay, so you might ask, why would mobile access influence behavior? And actually the answer is that there is too much theory for us to cover in one paper. It's really vast literature with inseparable predictions. So to manage expectations, we will not be able to pinpoint the exact theory or mechanism, but we will be able to show something about which theories are most consistent with our empirical evidence. I will go over the related models, and we classify them into 2 classes. The first one are theories related to the availability of information. We can access it on the mobile device. And the other pieces of evidence or models are related to our ability to process this information on the mobile device. So let me start with the first one, the availability of information. The first one would be the rational inattention. According to this class of models, consumers do not update their information and action continuously, but rather than sporadically because of costs of obtaining and processing information. The prediction of this class of models says that the introduction of mobile apps should increase the optimal level of attention and improve the consumer's decisions. Okay, information is good. People may use it to make better decisions. So better access means better decisions. Some practical evidence, according to a Fed survey, 62% of mobile banking users reported actually checking their balances on their mobile device in the store. And as a result, 50% of them decided not to purchase an item. So this is just, I think, a nice illustration. A second class of models are the information-dependent utility models. According to these models, information is not just a mean to an end, but it directly enters the agent's utility function, meaning that checking your bank account might make you feel happier or very sad if you are maybe overdrafting. And attention that might be triggered, for example, by cell phones, might amplify this hedonic impact on information and might lead to an ostrich effect. You might avoid information just because it makes you feel bad. The prediction of this class of models is that people that are not at ease with their personal finances, maybe, for example, low-income individuals, will pay less attention to their finances and decrease their spending more relative to high income or people that are feeling at ease with their personal finances after installing the mobile app. And the last one in this class are theories or models related to the monitoring of the household members. So we talk about the household most of the time as if it was just one unit, but it actually consists of members that have distinct preferences and are sometimes at least partially self-interested. In fact, how my spouse handles money was quoted as a leading factor in 40% of divorce cases in the US. So the prediction is that these mobile apps will improve the monitoring ability between household members. It might lead to improved household spending decision, but also might cause some additional conflicts within the household. So this is for this class of theories. The second class of explanations are related to the information processing ability, and the first one would be mobile phones have been continuous. There is a lot of evidence showing that mobile phones promote a distracted frame of mind. Just having the phone in a room with you, even if you know that it's off, is grabbing some of your limited attention, and that's because we are conditioned to pay attention to our phone the same way that we're conditioned to pay attention when someone calls out our name. And in fact, we see that there is evidence that a mobile phone usage is related with lower grades and unsafe behavior on the roads, okay? And the last one, the mobile devices have some hardware features that were documented to reduce our ability to make good decisions. For example, the touch screen, the screen side, and the spatial layout that does not have a constant navigation bar all influence our decision-making ability for the worse, okay? So the prediction of this class of model is that individuals will make worse decisions when switching from viewing their information on a mobile, from a PC to a mobile device. There is no clear prediction of what will happen when they use the mobile device in addition to a PC, okay? So this is our base hypothesis. We want to see what really happens in the data. Our paper is also related to the influence of technology on financial behavior. Okay, so in the early 2000s, there were papers showing how the traders, investors are changing their behavior when switching from calling their broker to an online platform. Investors also invest better after joining a robo-advisor app. Text messages can improve saving rates. Adoption of e-commerce app like eBay on a mobile device increases the household spending. And the paper most similar to ours is by Carling, Olofsson, and Pagel, using the same instrument, showing the release of a mobile app in Iceland will make consumers pay more attention and reduce their financial fee expense, okay? So the data that we have is, we get it from a company that provides free personal financial management app. It includes an account aggregation technology feature. I think we all know what it is, but basically a user can link all their accounts from all sources into one place and see how much they spend in all their credit cards, or how diversified they are in all their investment accounts, including their retirement accounts. It's commonly offered by financial services, no longer just the small companies, but also the big banks in the US, the Merrill Lynch, the Bank of America are offering this technology for free, and it's widely used in academic research. Many of the authors are in attendance with us, okay? Importantly, the app does not allow any other financial action rather than viewing the information. This allows us to focus on the information access channel rather than anything else. Okay, and the data that we have is transaction data and the login activity, which we use as a proxy for attention to personal finances. Now, clearly there is an endogeneity concern. People choose if they want to install the app or not, might be related to a different decision to cut spending or maybe to pay more attention to their finances. So we break it down into two problems or two challenges. The first one is people choose if they want to install the app at all. So our results are conditional on the adoption of the mobile app, meaning that we only know that, and I will get back to this point after I show you the result. The second challenge is that people choose the timing of the app installation, and for that we have an instrument. We use the gradual release of the 3 mobile apps. So the company first released their web app, okay, just available on the internet, but in the following year, they released the 3 mobile apps at different calendar times that are nicely spread. And what we can see here is the number of installations by event day after the release of the app. Okay, these are only people that were already using the web app before, the people in our sample. And what we see is that in any given day, there aren't many people installing the app. But just after the release of each of these apps, there is a large mass or a large count of people installing the app. So it's unlikely that many people will decide to install the app endogenously on a random day. It's unlikely to coincide with the release of the app, and it's unlikely to happen in 3 different times on 3 different apps. So we say that the people that install the app just right after it was released, it was triggered by the release of the app, which is exogenous to the user rather than an internal decision, okay? So our sample selection criteria, we require that people have enough history so we can know their pre-mobile installation behavior. We require them to be sufficiently active in terms of login activity, that we observe some income, some spending, and that they link sufficient amount of accounts, okay? We split our sample into 2, sample X for exogenous and sample N for endogenous. So sample X are just the users that install the app in the 2 weeks after the release. This allows us to identify the causal relationship. The timing is exogenous, and the rest are probably made a decision to install the app, so we call them a sample N. It's a robustness sample, it's large, so we have more power, but we cannot separate the causal effect on that sample. Okay, our main spending-dependent variable of interest would be discretionary spending. So we would not expect people to be able to change their spending on their mortgage, on the rent, or the utilities. These are hard to adjust, especially over a short period of time. Instead, we chose categories that people have more discretion over, things like entertainment or dining. And we have here the full list, an example of each of these categories. The guiding principle when constructing this variable is to include all the industries that constitute the consumer discretionary sector. Okay, these are the most cyclical or the most sensitive industries in the economy. Okay, the one that suffer the most right now in the pandemic era. Okay, so here are the summary statistics by sample X and the sample N. We see that over the entire sample period, we see that people log in approximately 14 times per month. A small portion is coming from the PC, personal computer logins. iPhone users log in the most, 10 times per month, just from the iPhone device, and Android comes second. Their median income is $12,000. And the median spending is $10,000. These are relatively wealthy individuals. They correspond to the 80th percentile of income in the US according to the Consumer Expenditure Survey of 2014. Their discretionary spending are approximately 30% of their overall spending. A big chunk of that is coming from restaurant closing, entertainment, and travel. And they also withdraw a lot of cash, make about approximately $500 per month are cash withdrawals. Sample N is very similar, yet they pay a bit, it's much larger, almost 7,000 individuals. And so we have more power, but they pay a bit less attention than Sample X, and they make a lower income and spend a bit less. Okay, but they are comparable, same order of magnitude. Our empirical, we have the panel data by user month. We follow each individual from the 3 months before the installation to the 12 months after. And we have 2 main specifications. One is the before and after. We have an indicator variable, 1 for post-installation, 0 for before. And we do the same thing with event months indicator, just so we can see the dynamics of the response. We have individual fixed effects, calendar months fixed effects, and everything is clustered at the individual level, as is commonly done in these studies. Our first result is the logins, which we use as a proxy for attention. And what we see here in the blue line are the predicted value from the regression that you just saw of monthly logins. We see that before the installation, people log in total of about 4 times per month. Immediately on the installation, there is a sharp increase in the number of logins, 4 times as much to 16. And this effect is immediate and persistent. As far as we can see, it stays at that level. Okay. Surprisingly to us, at least, all the increase is coming from mobile devices, and in fact, and there is no substitution. They are still using the personal computers in the same way, approximately 4 times per month. We see the same response in sample N, except that in sample N, there is also a temporary increase in the logins from a personal computer, and we think that might be related to an endogenous decision to pay more attention to their finance, but the response is also large, almost the same magnitude, and also immediate and persistent, okay? The next thing we do is to check what is the time of the day that people log in from their mobile devices. So on a regular PC, we see that people log in most around 7 or 8 a.m. And then there is a decline in the frequency all the way to the night. After they install the mobile app in the red line on weekdays, we see that they do log in pretty much the same from a mobile device, but there is an additional peak here around 4 to 6 p.m. That they log in only from their mobile devices. And that corresponds to the rush hour, commuting back from work before the pandemic, or it's also retail peak time, the time that is busiest at the stores. So that would be consistent with either people just being bored on the way back from work and checking their phone, or actually checking their balances at the store, consistent with a Fed survey. So what we can say here together is that there seems to be some unmet demand for information. There is demand for information that is not met by personal computers, okay? We can see a sharp decline in the discretionary spending. This is log discretionary spending. We see for sample X, there is an 11% drop almost immediately after the installation of the mobile app, slightly lower magnitude for sample N. This corresponds to approximately $400 reduce in discretionary spending for sample X and approximately $200 for sample N, okay? We break it down by different spending categories, that some of them are a part of the discretionary spending, and we can see a clear decline in restaurant closing and entertainment. These are spending that are mostly spontaneous, but also not too significant here on the travel, significant for sample N. This is probably a luxury item for many of the individuals that require some planning. We also see a decline in the cash withdrawals, and that is consistent with the evidence that people place higher subjective value for transactions that are conducted in cash rather than with a credit card, okay? We also see heterogeneity in the effect. We split the sample into two, above and below median income and above and below spending to income. And we see that for income, at least, all the effect of cutting spending is coming from the bottom half of the below median individuals of income, okay? And also the same thing for the logins. The people that are high income log in more than people with low income. We see the same results for spending to income. And that is consistent with a model saying that people that are not at comfort with their personal finance will check their accounts less because it gives them this utility, and will cut their spending more, okay, because the influence on their mood. Okay, we provide some additional tests. We test first the overall impact, the impact on overall spending, and we see that there is effect. It's almost significant for the sample X and significant for the sample N. This is not surprising. This is just a mechanical relationship because discretionary spending is a large part of the overall spending. In fact, we check the influence on non-discretionary spending and we do not find anything. We use these non-discretionary items as falsification test. We see no change in utilities, telephone, rent, and other things like mortgage, etc. So this tells us that the decline in spending on discretionary items is not just a shift to other things, okay, but an actual decline in spending, which should lead to an increase in savings. Let's talk about a bit of robustness. If you're concerned about trends in the outcome variables, so first of all, the pre-event period does not reveal any trend in the outcome variables, at least for sample X. we have 3 exogenous events at 3 different points in time and almost immediate response. This does not cannot easily be explained with a time trend. We have months fixed effect that should absorb the common time trend. But if you're still unconvinced, we also have a matching estimator and we get pretty much the same results. Okay, a bit of limitation and interpretation of the study. So we show that there is a fact of this one app that we check. Can we generalize it to other apps? So we claim that the personal financial management, account aggregation apps are relatively standard. Yes, there are a few exotic animals out there, but most of them are providing the same key summary statistics about overall spending and breakdown by the different categories. They look pretty similar, and ours is no exception. Unlike the banking apps, maybe, our app does not provide, or all these apps do not provide the ability to take any action. So this is an advantage for our purposes. We can focus on the information channel, but actually we have evidence showing that people use their mobile banking apps pretty much only for checking their account balances, okay? Very much smaller fraction of them actually use those apps to make transactions, so the usage patterns are pretty similar. Our results are conditional on the adoption of the mobile app. We only study individuals that have some interest in their finances, otherwise they would not be using this app at all, and decided to install the mobile app. We do not know what would be the adoption rate on the general population. We do not know or claim to know what would be the effect on people that were forced to install or use the app, okay? The way to interpret our study is the mobile app has a causal impact on the financial behavior of users in a sample that have interest in their finances above and beyond their endogenous decision to install the app. Okay, this is our claim. This type of studies is common in the medical literature where people self-select into all kinds of dieting tools, but very few of them work. We'll give examples in the paper. Overall, the implication to the theory, our evidence is consistent with rational inattention models, but it is still surprising because you need a large cost, a reduction from switching from a personal computer into a mobile device. We at least didn't think that checking it on a PC is that bad. You can log in every morning, see your balances, and hit and get out of your home. Another way to reconcile this without a huge cost for the login from a PC is that people are actually influenced more by the salience of information, the timing of it on a mobile device, rather than making a fully rational decision. And the differential effect on low income and high spending individual is consistent with the information dependent utility models. There is a lot of direction and things that we do not know that will need to be explored in a future research. First and foremost would be the welfare implication. We do not claim to know that people are better off or worse off. It depends on the model that you subscribe to. And I would like to end with the following subjective observation. We already have enough information to understand that the platform influences behavior. We learn this in economics, in finance, in other fields about once a decade when people switch from phone to a personal computer, now to a smartphone, and we have to stay tuned for the next evolution. Should be coming at the end of in a couple of years. And it's easy to forget between the switches because now, for example, most new users in the US at least are only installing the mobile app, and many individuals around the world do not even own a PC. Okay, so thank you. I will end here.
Thanks very much, Yaron. While you're unsharing your screen, discussant is Francesco da Cunto from Boston College. The screen is yours.
Great. So let me thank Paul and Anders for asking me to discuss this very interesting paper, and Yaron for the very good presentation. I always like to summarize a paper just by one picture. So this is the picture I picked here, like combining some of the pictures also we saw from Yaron himself. So the idea of the paper is that we look at users who were on a PC, so they were already accessing a certain financial app on their PC, and suddenly they also have available a mobile app. So what happens to these people? Where the first fact on the left, the logins typically through the app increase substantially after they've installed the app. They still keep logging into the PC, but at the usual frequency as before. And the second crucial fact is that when we look at their discretionary spending, we see that before the installation of the app, this is normalized at a level of 0. This level decreases and seems to stay lower after the installation. So monthly discretionary spending drops. These, I think, are the two crucial facts. And then, of course, we saw also from Yaron a lot of heterogeneity, robustness checks, and so on and so forth. So I think the importance of the paper is the fact that, as we know, and as Yaron also mentioned, it becomes really relevant for us to understand how accessing information as well as many other services, and this is also where some of my comments for the discussion will focus on, how does this changes consumers' behavior? This is obviously important because more and more of these apps are popping up all over the world. So I think the authors have an interesting and smart design because they can indeed compare people that were accessing the app on the PC and only subsequently move to the mobile phone. So this allows to think about a set of endogeneity issues of selecting into the app in general, as opposed to selecting to the mobile app. But we will see that there's some differences between the PC and the mobile app. So that I think is an area where probably the paper can do more. I think overall, there's very convincing evidence that spending drops after these people access the mobile income aggregator, and the evidence, I think, is really clear also because of the nice graphs. So it's a pleasure to read this paper. I invite you to do so. So in terms of my comments, and basically the whole discussion, I think, will focus on the first point. So the authors discuss this kind of theoretical predictions in terms of what are the effects of information on behavior, but which information are really people accessing more once they move to the app? And more important, is it really information about their financings, or is it many other features that might be different once you start with the app relative to what you had in the PC, such as alerts, nudges, pieces of advice, and so on and so forth? We will see that there is a growing literature studying every individual one of these features also in apps, so we can learn something out of that. And then I will talk a bit more about, I would really encourage the author to use their grade setting. I think that's a great setting where to think about the aggregate implications of these results. So I think a simple back-end envelope calculation would be interesting. And finally, if I have time, something about more broadly where FinTech research seems to be going. All right, so for the first point, then what really happens once we start the app relative to the PC website? So the authors, for confidentiality reasons, I guess, they don't say what is the app. So I had to do some kind of educated guess based on something I found online that was discussing the author's results. I'm not sure this is actually the app they're using. I'm using Personal Capital here. If it's not, let's just take it as an example of what happens in these mobile phone apps relative to the PC. So what I did is I signed up for the app. And so there's a set of features that I found quite different in the mobile app relative to the PC. So first of all, the idea that the app really asks you since the very beginning if you want to install push notifications. And so if I say yes, what I realize is that I start immediately, as I do any kind of transaction, getting text notifications that invite me to log in into the app by clicking inside my phone. So this could be one of the reasons why mechanically people go more into the app, because they receive notifications for that. And so what was the very first notification I got? Well, actually, it's a notification that tries to convince me to meet with one of their advisors. I guess, I don't know why, probably this is because the company has some features that, you would pay some fees if you have an advisor, whereas otherwise you wouldn't. So it's their interest somehow to have us meet the advisor. But why is this important? And even when I said, no, I don't want to, they were insisting with this point. Well, because we know that financial advice, especially on apps, has a strong influence on individuals' behavior. Now, for instance, this is a paper I have with Prabal and Alberto Rossi at Georgetown. This is based on choice under risk. So these are decisions in terms of portfolio choices. It's not consumption choices. But what we have here is also similarly an app where you can get in, and through the app, you have much easier access to financial advice. So why we see what we find there is that people that have access to financial advice, this affects their behavior substantially in this setting of choice under risk, and also very heterogeneously across the population. So why is this important? Because this would have really, I mean, it's not saying that the paper is not right in saying that after moving to mobile, people change their behavior, but it makes a very different interpretation of these results. It would have nothing to do with observing my own information. So what I'm doing, it's instead about the extent to which I want to follow the advice I get from somebody else, financial advice, financial literacy, and so on and so forth. Another feature that I wanted to bring up, because it's one of the first features I noticed in the app, is this idea of the month-to-month comparisons, which I found in the app. So here I'm showing you, I only linked one of my accounts. I should have probably canceled the numbers, but whatever. So what you see here in these pictures is in dark blue is what is the cash flows over time for my own account this month. So this would be August. I did this picture yesterday. And the other line instead tells me what was the cash flow dynamics for the previous month in my own checking account. So basically we are comparing my own spending before relative to now. And so this obviously has a feature which is in large part potentially interpreted as a normative form of feature. So irrespective of what is the information I receive, given that the app is telling me, in this case, for instance, you're doing better than last time because your cash flows this month, day by day, are higher relative to the ones you had that month, then I'm doing fine. I don't need to make any change to my behavior. Now, this is a feature that I didn't find in this is not my account, by the way, so this is not my net worth. This is a picture I got from the internet of the desktop version. And I couldn't find this feature, for instance, in the PC version. So is this type of feature important? Again, it's not relative to, even in the PC, I was accessing already my information. This is something else. It's already in the realm of advising what I should do. So is it relevant? Well, we do have evidence from other papers that I encourage the authors potentially to cite, that also in the context of apps have studied explicitly this feature, so month-to-month comparison. So one is a paper by Sung Lee, who was I think a PhD candidate from NYU Stern, is joining CUHK this year. And so similar in the API studies, which I think is in Canada, he has a setting in which people get compared through the mobile phone app to what they were doing the months before. So a very similar month-to-month comparing. And what he finds in his paper, here he plots basically the overall spending of these individuals. And around this line, it shows people that are shown that they are spending more relative to the previous month, relative to less. We can see that those that are told, well, look, you're spending more than last month, they follow on this alert. So they indeed cut their spend after they receive this alert. Now, a similar feature on another paper I have with Alberto Rossi and Michael Weber, on crowdsourcing peer information to change spending behavior. So this is indeed an app that works on spending. And in this app, actually the whole point of this app is to make comparisons, both of individuals with their own spending in previous months, as well as individuals with the spending of peers, which in this app are defined as groups of people in the general population that look like them in terms of income, occupations, and so on and so forth. And so we can see in this type of app, for instance, similar to what we saw in the picture I showed you from Personal Capital before, it makes very vivid this comparison in very, very vivid graphics. Here, for instance, the blue solid line represents the spending of fictitious users, and this is compared to the spending of the peers in orange, the national US average in red, and also the own person average income every month in this gray line. And so people can very easily see these sort of pieces of evidence, and also clearly this could have a kind of a advising role, kind of a robo-advising for consumption role for these people. And so what we find in this paper very similar is indeed that those people that see that are spending more than their peers which is the people on the right part of this vertical line here, they do cut their spending quite substantially in the following months. So here on the y-axis, I have the spending change 3 months afterwards or 2 months before starting the app. Those that are below the peers, they slowly also converge to the peers, but this rate is asymmetric. Yeah, thank you, Anders. And so I think I bring up also this evidence because in terms of heterogeneity, for instance, this is very similar to the heterogeneity results Yaron has in his paper. So first of all the results are driven by discretionary spending, nothing by non-discretionary. Also a large component that changes is cash withdrawals, which is also what the authors find. And also crucial, it's many lower income users that are reacting, which is the left graph here, whereas relatively higher income, you know, everybody who's in these apps, of course, needs to have at least an account. So they're not like people, I mean, extremely low income, but relatively higher income people don't seem to react to that. So even the heterogeneity seem to speak to each other. So these are 2 examples of different features. I mean, there could be many others, I believe. So I think as the paper is now, I mean, again, I'm not claiming that what the paper says it's not true, that people change their spending after accessing the app. I completely believe this fact, but I think the paper needs more, even in light of this earlier and contemporaneous research that studies specific features at the same time. So what are my suggestions in this sense? Well, first of all, in terms of this potential role for advising, can you see or get data from the company whether users access advisors more after they start going into the app or not? If they do, how much? If they don't, that would already be an important result to dismiss that channel. In terms of the month-to-month comparisons, so do you observe how many people go into that tab of the app? I don't know, honestly, if this information is available for the app, but if it was, that would be helpful. Overall, I think that this is an ideal setting to potentially disentangle of these different features. So first of all, even if I fully understand the author's need to potentially for confidentiality reasons not say what the app is, I think it would be really helpful to have more background on what are the differences between the mobile versus the desktop PC, given a reader cannot see them on their own, they cannot, because they don't know what the company is. And also more discussion of how do different features matter, because otherwise the theoretical implications are really hard to take. So it's hard to say that this is anything to do with the provision of information per se relative to any of these other advice and features. Now, a second reason why I think the paper is important, I would encourage the authors to do a bit more in this sense, is to think in terms of aggregate results. So I think that the paper is a great setting to assess quantitatively. So how much do these apps increase saving rates within users? Yaron was mentioning this towards the very end, that this reduced from evidence in total spending and also the non-discretionary spending that doesn't change. So can we say anything about like, will these apps ultimately change individuals' behavior? Which individuals' behavior will be changed substantially or not? And what about the aggregate effects? So now we understand the low-income individuals probably cut their spending by more than others in terms of a cross-country comparison, but are these cuts relevant in general in terms of the overall lifetime wealth accumulation saving rate? Some good back on the envelope calculation in terms of comparing how much would like these savings give these people if they were putting them in a savings account or in some other type of form would help in this sense. And also in an aggregate. So is this phenomenon of apps suggesting to us that we will see some substantial changes in important facts related to lifetime utility accumulation because of these results? Or instead are the effects significant statistically, but in terms of economic magnitudes, not as relevant? I think, I mean, both of these results would be interesting. None of the two would undermine the results in the paper, but I think the literature now, given there's so many of these papers on looking at apps, would really benefit from this kind of taking stock. And I think Yaron's paper is a very good one to do this. Now, very last few seconds that I have, I mean, just because, I mean, often now, because of discussions, refereeing of many of these apps papers at this point, You know, everybody asks the whole time, what is FinTech? We don't understand what FinTech is. So I want to give you my like 20-second pitch for some survey I'm in the process of preparing that has been requested to me. So what is a defining feature of FinTech? I think the crucial feature is anything that deals with understanding the role of big and open data in finance. And so here I have this kind of 5 rings, which I call the 5 rings of FinTech research. So the very 2 top ones are more related to using existing empirical and theoretical instruments to understand big data in finance, like machine learning, textual analysis, and so on and so forth. The green one, it's a creating new and empirical theoretical paradigms to understand this open data in finance, for instance, understanding the blockchain technology. And the 3 rings in the bottom instead are the ones in which Yaron's paper fit, and many of these apps paper fit. In particular, this red ring, which is the idea of using big open data in order to advise non-expert households. So the crucial feature, I believe, of FinTech research in terms of apps and what the apps do is not merely the fact of allowing people to access information more easily, but in large part to combine all these pieces of information and to elaborate them in a form of advice that users can get. And so it's very different from what we find, for instance, in all our robo-advising papers, both for investment and consumption. It's very, very different to tell people this is your situation and to tell people this is what you should do. So this form of nudge or advice changes people's behavior much, much more than just providing information. So this also begets for a different theoretical interpretation. It's hard to interpret the role of these apps in a simple framework in which we think about having more or less information, because this is not really the crucial feature that changes people's behavior. It's really telling them you should do this and that, more than showing them some more info. All right, so I'm out of time. So I think this is a great paper. You should definitely read it. I think, I mean, my suggestions are mainly in terms of interpretation. So I really look forward to see more of the work that the authors have. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Francesco. While we're waiting to see if someone else wants to ask a question, maybe Yaron, you want to respond?
Yeah, so thank you very much, Francesco. That's a beautiful discussion. All comments are well taken. I will have to think about most of them a bit more. What I can say for now, and again, I apologize, I cannot discuss reveal the identity of the company, but they did invest or do invest a lot of money in a cross-platform experience, making sure that they get the same experience across all devices and the web. The people that we study are not a lead of the company, whatever it is they're selling, if it's financial advice or advisors, for example, then we did not get access to these users. I should make a mention of that somehow in the paper. At least for sample X, which is a sample of identification, back in the day, we still did not have early 2000s push notifications. We only had badge app icon, which is a number that pops up on the icon of the app. But there's still some thing to think about if that might be triggering the extra attention. Definitely need to think about this a bit more. And we restrict the sample period, so the app did evolve over time. So it's relatively uniform. That's why we only track people for the 12-month and not more than that. There is hardly any attrition out of being a user of this app. Okay, and but thank you. I will pay close attention to all the comments. That's very helpful. Thank you, Francesco.
All right, thanks all. I don't see any raised hands in the chat now, but we plan to have a after conference chat, and I'll see if you get the link there. Maybe you got it before. So the idea is that we meet up there and people can ask authors questions who are willing to stick around, and I will also go into the chat. You will have to bring your own drinks. And I thank you all for some 4 excellent papers. I wish I could write good papers like that. But thank you all, and hope to see as many of you as possible tomorrow. Cheers.